Loops in JavaScript. Now, loops are fundamental in programming, allowing you to execute a block of code multiple times. So JavaScript provides several types of loops, each suited for different types. Now we're gonna just dive into each type of the loop and understand how they work with by doing also some few examples there. Now the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna right click here and create a new HTML file, loops dot, because they still fall under flow control. So you can say loops dot HTML, and then create another file called loops dot JS that we can actually load into our HTML document. Now the first loop that we'll start with is the for loop. The for loop is the most commonly used loop. It repeats a block of code a specific number of times. Now the initialization is executed once before the loop starts. So this is usually where you initialize the loop counter, and then the condition is evaluated before each loop iteration. So if it's true, then the loop continues. If it's false, then the loop ends. And then the increment is executed after the loop iteration. So this is usually where you update the loop counter. So imagine if we want to print numbers from 1 to 5. So we'll actually do an example like this. We can say 4, and then we can initialize a variable and then store a value in it. And then we'll take that variable and say, put a condition and say I is less, as long as I is less or is equal to 5, then we want to increment I. Then we're gonna console log the value of I. Now if we look at this, then we'll see that it will be counting from 1. Now let I is 1 indicates or initializes the counter whereby I to 1, and then I is less or equal 5. It's a condition. All right, so we're checking the condition if I is less or equals to 5, and then I plus plus, it increments I by 1 after each iteration. Right, so that means that it's gonna check if I is less than 5, then it adds 1 to I, so it becomes 2. Remember, I initially is 1, and then it adds 1 to I, which is 2, and then it comes back and check again, 2 is less than 5, and then it will add another 1 to 2, it becomes 3, 3 is less than 5, and so on up until it reaches 5. All right, then we have the while loop. Now the while loop repeats a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. For example, we can say, I'm just going to comment out this. We can say let I is less or equal 5, then we want to log the value of I. Now we're still gonna get the same results, but in this example that we are doing here, so let's actually have a look, and then we're still getting the same results, 1 through 5. All right, so in this example we initialize the counter to 1. All right, and then we set the condition. So the condition is actually checked before each iteration, and then we increment I by 1 after each iteration. And then now we also have a do while loop. Now the do while is similar to the while loop. The only difference is that it guarantees that the code block will be executed at least once before the condition is evaluated after the block of code is executed. Now we can still do the same and say let I be 1, and then do, and then console.log I. So, and then we increment I, and then while I is less or equal to 5. So in this example, we initialize the count at 1, and then the code here that we put within our braces is executed first, and then we have the condition that is checked after the code is executed. Then we have the for in loop. Now the for in loop iterates over innumerable properties of an object, so it's primarily used for iterating over the object properties. Let's do an example. For in, let's say, imagine that you have an object representing a person, and then you want to print all its properties. So we can create an object here, iterate over this. So we can use for, and then let a key in person all the properties there. Now if we can actually see all the properties of that object, of the person object. So in this example, for let key in person iterates over each property in the person object, and then the person key accesses the values of each property. And then now the next loop that we have is the for of. Let me just make a comment for of. Now the for of loop iterates over the values of the iterable objects like an array, like a string, or any other collection. So it's primarily used for iterating over just elements of an array or maybe other iterable conditions. So let's say maybe we've got an array called fruits, and then in that array we'll have some values there. Let's say apple. Now we can say for let a fruit of fruits. So this should actually print out the values of the array there, all the values of the array. Now in this example, for let fruit of fruit iterates over each element in the fruits array, and then fruit represents each element in the array. Now in summary, for loop is best for a known number of iterations. It's suitable for iterating over an array when you know the exact range or you know the exact length. And then the while loop is best when the number of iteration is not known beforehand, and it depends on each conditions. And then the do while a loop ensures that the code is executed at least once before checking the condition. And the for in is best for iterating over the properties of an object, and then the for of loop is best for iterating over the values of an iterable objects like an array, like a strings, all of that. Let's say we want to find the sum of numbers of an array using the for loop, maybe to actually calculate the sum of all numbers in an array. I'm just gonna comment out all of this, and we could have a variable, let's call it numbers, and then here we're gonna store 1 through 5, and then we can have let sum be equal to 0, and then you can use the loop. So we say let I be 0, and then as long as I is less than the numbers dot length, and then we're just gonna say sum, then we're just gonna log so here we're just using the for loop to calculate the sum of all numbers that are in an array. Now if we look at that, then we get 15. Another example, let's say now using the while loop to repeatedly ask for user input until we get a valid response. In this example, we can say let user input and then while not user input, or user input to trim. This must be string, so you should just say please enter your name, and you can log. Now if we look into this one, I should have actually cancelled the other loop. Let's just try this again. So now this is gonna continue to prompt. If I put my number, a number, and then it does nothing. So but if I put my name there, then it should, if we look at the console, then it should actually return my name. Now understanding these loops and their use cases will help you to write a more efficient code, enabling you to handle different programming tasks effectively. Now, remember that loops are essential to construct in programming, essential construct in programming because they allow you to execute a block of code multiple times, which can significantly simplify repetitive tasks, okay, and reduce redundancy in your code. Right. So we can use them for automation of repetitive tasks. So because loops now enable you to automate tasks that will otherwise require writing the same code multiple of times. Let's say, for example, printing numbers from 1 to 100. Or also efficiency in code reduction as well, and it helps in writing more concise and maintainable code by reducing repetition. For example, we did an example of summing up all the elements in the array without writing separate statements for each element. And then for dynamic operations as well, loop can handle tasks where numbers of iterations is determined at a runtime. An example, maybe processing user input until a valid input is provided. And then also loops are essential for iterating over data structures such as arrays, objects, and collections. Maybe you want to iterate over an array of user data to display each user's details. And then also you can use them for, many algorithms and data processing tasks rely heavily on loops to function correctly. Maybe you want to sort algorithms like a bubble sort, which requires repeated comparison and swapping of elements as well. Now, just in conclusion, loops are indispensable in programming for automation repetitive tasks and processing data and implementing complex algorithms. They help you in writing cleaner, more efficient, and more maintainable code. So by understanding and using the loops effectively, you can handle a wide range of programming challenges and just improve the overall flow and functionality of your applications as well.